The girl whom you brought to your house as your sister, and she kills you out of greed. My name is Jan. I am 59 years old, and I own a modest mobile phone shop in our neighborhood. Each morning I open my shop and arrange the displays. Each evening I close up and walk back home. My wife passed away some years ago, and since then my life has been quiet and steady. I live with my only son. The two of us have kept a simple rhythm. Work, home, small talk over dinner. There is comfort in that routine, and for a long time our simple life felt enough. I find peace in the small things, a customer's grateful smile, the soft light falling on the shop window, the sound of the street at closing time. When night comes, I go home and sit with my son. We eat together, remember my wife, and fall asleep to the low hum of the city. Despite the absence of my partner, our days held an easy contentment, until one day, when I found myself thinking about the future in a way I hadn't before, about leaving, and what would become of him after I was gone. One afternoon, over tea, I broached the subject that had lingered at the edge of my thoughts. I don't know when I will die, I said plainly to my son. It wasn't a morbid confession, just an honest thought a man of my age must reckon with. It would be better if you married, I added. The words felt strange and final as they left me, but he only nodded, accepting my concern. He had always been a considerate man, steady and responsive in the way sons often are, to the quiet wishes of their fathers. I asked him if there was anyone he liked, someone he might consider for marriage. He paused, then smiled, and said yes. It was a small answer that carried the weight of sudden possibility. I felt an unexpected warmth at the thought of our house filled with another life. Someone to keep him company, and to share the domestic tasks that had fallen to us both since my wife's death. Hope moved through me like a soft light. I began to imagine a new season for our family. He told me the girl's name, Alice. Hearing it felt like the first clear note of music after a long silence. I encouraged him to speak with her about marriage. Such matters were still traditional where we live. But he seemed confident. He spoke to Alice, and she agreed. I remember the day he told me. There was a tenderness in his voice, a tremor of happiness I hadn't heard before. We set a week to prepare for the wedding. In that 1 week, the house buzzed with small tasks and friendly hands. Neighbors offered help, and we arranged the modest celebration the way we could. I watched my son as he made plans and thought, briefly, of my late wife and how pleased she would have been to see this joy. The week passed quickly. Between the bustle of the shop and arranging the wedding's small details, the days blurred. But when the wedding day arrived, the warmth and celebration made everything feel worthwhile. Laughter, music, and the comfort of relatives sharing food and blessing the couple. The wedding was modest but full of meaning. People came from nearby and from farther away to congratulate the young couple. We celebrated with food and small songs. My heart was lighter than it had been in a long time as I watched my son and Alice exchange vows. After the ceremony, the two of them settled into married life. The first year seemed to pass in a pleasant blur of small joys. Shared meals, quiet conversations in the evenings, the comfort of two people learning a new life together. They loved each other deeply. It showed in the way they looked at one another, in the gentle help Alice gave my son with household chores, and in the way they laughed together over small, private jokes. I continued working at my shop and watching them from the doorway as they organized the home. I felt a steady kind of happiness, as if life had given us a soft second chance. Besides the mobile phone shop, I owned a few pieces of property in my name. Knowing that my son now had a family, I transferred half of that property to him. A practical gesture, a way to secure his future. It felt natural to divide the responsibilities and the ownership between us. We had always trusted each other. Time settled into its familiar rhythm. Mornings in the shop, evenings at home. Alice tended the house. She cooked, cleaned, and made our small house feel warm and orderly. The presence of my daughter-in-law softened the edges of sorrow that lingered from my wife's absence. We spoke less about the past and more about ordinary things, like the best brand of mobile chargers or the neighbor's new baby. Days flowed gently by, and I felt an unexpected calm. At night, sometimes, I would go to bed with a sense of quiet gratitude that my son had found a partner who cared for him. For a while, life was simple and good. Then one afternoon Alice suggested a trip. She and my son wanted time away together, a brief escape from the routine to breathe and to enjoy each other's company. It seemed like a healthy idea. They prepared their things, packed a few clothes, and took the car. They planned to be gone for 2 or 3 days, an easy weekend journey. I waved them off at the gate with a small, fatherly smile, feeling a mix of contentment and a mild, needless worry that all parents carry. The days passed, and I kept the shop open, as usual. though my thoughts wandered to their laughter and the imagined scenes of them walking hand in hand by some roadside cafe or a quiet hill. I hoped they would return refreshed. The rhythm of the neighborhood continued, children playing in the street, vendors closing their stalls. But a small, uneasy thread had begun to weave itself into the fabric of my days. On their return, the news came like a cold wind. There had been an accident on the road. I remember the moment I heard it. A neighbor had come with a look I could not read, and then the words tumbled out. My son had died on the spot. His wife, Alice, had survived with minor injuries. For a few stunned seconds, nothing made sense. My knees weakened, and a vast emptiness opened in my chest. I could not find words. The world contracted to that single fact. He was gone. I cried until I had no more tears. Days blurred into a painful fog. I could not eat. I could not listen to the phone ring. The small routines that had ordered my life, opening the shop, counting the day's earnings, were suddenly meaningless. I kept imagining him in the house as if he had only stepped out for a moment. Grief distorts time. Minutes and hours stretched long and heavy, as I tried to understand how one drive could erase the future we had planned. For 3 days I did not go to the shop. I stayed home and let the world continue without me. Friends and neighbors came to offer condolences, each face a blur of sympathy and careful words. The body had been taken, prayers had been said, and the house held the scent of incense and the heavy silence of mourning. In the empty corners of the home, I kept seeing the small things that had been his. A jacket hanging on the chair, a half-drunk cup on the table, the phone charger he always misplaced. I spoke to him aloud sometimes, as if he might answer. Those 2 or 3 days of grief were a slow, painful passage. Sleep found me briefly, and then fled, leaving me to lie awake, thinking of the suddenness of death and the vanishing of a life that had seemed solid and ordinary just a week before. The house no longer felt like home. It felt like a hollow vessel to months past, but the wound inside me did not heal. The small rhythms returned in a hollowed form. I reopened the shop, handled customers, and carried on because the world expected it. Still, the house was different. My daughter-in-law, Alice, recovered from her injuries and slowly resumed daily life. To the outside eye, she appeared composed. Inside, I imagined pain and loss too. I, however, felt an emptiness that followed me like a shadow. I tried to keep a routine, to keep my hands busy with inventory and bills. But grief is a stubborn companion. It sits quietly until it flares without warning. Some nights I found myself wandering the house, touching the things my son had used, speaking his name into the darkness. The days moved on with a mechanical steadiness, but the trust and warmth that had once filled our home were fractured beyond repair. Then, slowly, I noticed a change in the air. Rumors, small and sharp, began to ripple through our neighborhood. People spoke in low voices about the property, and I felt a new unease. In my private moments, I watched Alice, who had once seemed so tender with him, and I tried to find in her eyes the same grief that hollowed me. But there was a different light sometimes, a brightness that made me uneasy. Life goes on in strange ways after loss. Some hold tightly to memory, others consider practicalities. I learned, in time, that she had taken steps to transfer my son's share of the property into her name. It began as a legal process, paperwork signed, and witnesses called. When she told me about it, her voice was even and matter. I felt a small fracture open in me, a doubt that grew like a shadow. Had grief changed her, or had something else been there all along waiting for the moment to act?